Oh, there we are. We should be, right?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, we're live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Virgin Authors. We are three friends bonded by our love of writing, struggling to navigate the publishing world. In this episode, we are so excited to present our second author in our collaboration with Zibby Books.
Sorry. We talk about this and yeah, I turned it off, Lise. Go
You
ahead.
did not. My name is Mandy McGuire, and I'm a Virgin author.
Hey, Mandy, I'm Jana Vandelar, and I'm a Virgin author too.
Hi, my name is Lissa, and I would like to introduce our guest. Mary Otis is the author of the novel Burst, forthcoming from Zibby Books in just a few weeks now, as well as a short story collection called Yes, Yes, Cherries. Her stories and essays have been published in major newspapers, magazines, literary journals, and anthologies. She's recently published her poetry as well. Mary has received fellowships and scholarships. She's taught fiction at UCLA and UC Riverside. Her stories have received more distinguished awards than we have time to mention. Originally from the Boston area, Mary now lives in Los Angeles. Mary, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's wonderful to join you, and I'm highly admiring of what you've created here and what this means to writers to have this kind of community, not only among yourselves, but the people tuning in as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's very kind.
It is. We are really trying to put together a community here. But listen, we are such a short show. I want to get right to it.
Yeah, there's so much to talk. This book is awesome, people.
So First is such a deeply moving book about the complicated relationship between Charlotte and Viva, the mother and daughter. And you show us the beauty in their lives, for instance, with how passionate the daughter is about her dancing. But you also show us the ways they are deeply flawed human beings. Can you tell us the origin of this story and how it developed?
Yes. So these two characters, Viva and Charlotte, Viva's the daughter, Charlotte's the mother. I had written about them in a short story that was published by Zibby, which is a really terrific literary journal that I highly recommend to everybody. And, when the story was published, I thought I was done with these characters, and that was that. But they continued to kind of haunt me. And this was a rather favorable haunting in that it felt urgent and pressing and, write about us some more. And I take that as a good sign when something's kind of, the twig scratching at the window or something even just bothering me. That to me is a good sign that you need to write about it. So I started to just take down more material. I originally thought the novel was going to be primarily from the mother's point of view, but then I started hearing that other voice again. And so that's why the book is told in dual narratives with both narrators overlapping. And so it was completely unexpected. I did not sit down and say, I'm going to write a novel about these two.
They just
Wow.
stay
Yeah,
with you.
We were talking about that, how they're the two different characters in the duel. It had to be tough writing that. It was
Well, it's such a it's exciting when something that short turns into something so much larger. The difference though between a short story is end oriented and you only have a little bit of space to work in. And so at first, while I was excited that there was going to be more about these two, it was also a little disorienting because I hadn't written a novel before. And so I suddenly felt like, oh, I could go over here. I could go over here. And there are a few plot lines that became elided early on that, some other characters I brought in because you just have so much more room to move. And now I love that. I love both forms. They're both beautiful. They both have, their inherent challenges, but they're beautiful in different ways.
Well, I just ordered your book of short stories and I can't wait for it to come.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, Mary, is this your first novel then, full length?
Yep. Yes.
Oh, it's amazing.
yeah,
Congratulations.
that's hard to believe because it's that well done. I mean,
Thank you.
every character in there has its world. I mean, it's just so you just get into every character. I mean, just miscellaneous. The janitor that was leaving a little note for mother. I mean, for not for mother, for Viva about her mother calling.
I mean, that
So
is the
good.
great thing about a novel, that you do have more room to write about each person.
Yeah.
While still keeping that focus. I mean, that's kind of the trick of it, to keep the tension going at the same level that you need to keep the tension going in a short story. So that, I think, is one of the big challenges of a novel.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that saggy middle everybody talks about.
The old saggy middle syndrome.
Got it.
So I loved the style of your writing. I felt it was really lyrical, and I would love to read just one sentence. And so if anyone is reading this on my NetGalley app, it's about page 171, but I'm just going to read one sentence and then I have a question for you. Viva looked at her students, each of them completely absorbed in the task of learning this new dance, and beneath their sass and bluster, beneath their casual cruelty, beneath their desperate distaste of childhood, she could see in each of them, like a personal pilot light, their wonder. I loved that. I kept reading it and reading it. And that's one sentence. And
So many phrases inside there that, I mean,
Yes,
the casual cruelty.
I know. And so for our listeners, right, we're a group of writers who focus on our words every day. Like, does this style come really naturally to you, or how long do you focus on each of these like really beautifully structured sentences? Because it was throughout the whole novel that way.
Thank you. And thank you for reading that. I really appreciate that. It's interesting, sometimes if I'm really lucky, I will hear a line kind of in its completion, right from the beginning. But I revise a lot, and I like to revise as I go. And there's some people like to just get the book down on the page and then revise, and that's equally good. Myself, that would be like forcing me to use my non-dominant hand or something. I like to go through and just pick at it, and I start where I left off the next day. I'll go through and revise what I had the day before. And I think also something I've learned along the way, when I said, sometimes if I'm lucky enough to kind of hear a sentence the way it's going to always be, is to know when to leave it alone and when to keep going with a sentence so that you don't pull it apart. That's kind of a skill of its own, to just leave well enough alone sometimes.
Yeah.
Mary, thank you for saying both of those things, because everyone tries to make me stop editing as I go. And so to have someone so successful and so beautiful writers say that you do, I do that. When I come back in, I'm like, okay, where was I? And I go back and I have to fix things.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that there are people though that it's much more comfortable for them to go straight through, and it helps them with their momentum and a lot of different things. And then, like, we're talking about this kind of picky, go over it. So those are, opposite ends of the spectrum, and then everyone else is kind of somewhere in between. But having taught a lot too, and observed how a lot of people write, I really think people should be given the freedom to edit the way they want, as long as they edit. The one thing I would say is don't not ever edit, and try not to edit so much that you kill it. I mean, I've seen that sometimes, that it's taken to such an extreme that then it can't breathe. So, but I really feel that all the methods are valid as long as you're editing in some way.
Actually, excuse me, but this actually segues into my question, because it is so beautifully written. I was talking when I made my notes, I was saying that, you mentioned how much research, you've done through nonfiction sources, which assisted you in your research, because you guys, this book is about dance. I mean, like, very specific things about dance, not just dance, but dancing, addiction, photography. It's just like, there's so much beauty in this. And so, and then on top of it, with this editing, like, how long did this book take to write? I guess that's what, it was a great segue.
That's a good question. But probably overall about 6 years.
Okay. With the editing and
with editing, and also teaching, I'm not teaching at the moment, but I had a pretty rigorous teaching schedule. And sometimes that's why a lot of teachers really work on those novels in the summer. But you're working through the entire year as well. But there were a lot of things. I love to research. So, for me, that's fun. And the
total fan,
ear
yeah.
syndrome, I had to read a little bit about that.
I wrote that.
Very,
I had no idea that was even there. I didn't know that
it's a
existed.
really strange, troubling thing, because if you couldn't get a piece of music out of your head, let alone maybe 5 pieces playing, I don't know.
I didn't know where that was going with the mother at first, and then it turns out, all the research that you did with it, that was fascinating. I'm like, I had no clue that. I thought
I'd
it
never
was,
heard of that before.
yeah, I thought she was going wonkers, actually.
Well,
I didn't think it was
they still don't know really what causes it. It's one of those things that it's not completely understood. So kind of any interpretation anybody would have is okay on that. Also a little bit, some research about the 60s, like when going backward with the mother's life. And so.
I wondered, because I wanted to meet you because that was exactly my life. That was my initial question. I mean, I was rolling in the back of the station wagon without the seat belts when I was a kid, and my mom was smoking away, probably had a little flask right there for all I know, but it was just so accurate. And there's another beautiful line, guys, I have to share with you. It was at the end, well, at the beginning, we were talking about the big cars, no seatbelts, cigarette smoke. But at the end, you wrote where the VW, they have this VW van and the stick shift hit her leg in 4th gear. And you wrote the quote, crosswinds pulled the camper about due to the engine being in the back. It was like steering a boat that was also her mother. I mean, do you see how that ties in? Every sentence that Mary writes, you guys, it's like she's talking about VW, but it's like now we're talking about the mother and her personality. It was beautiful,
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's funny because I still don't know how to shift. And so that's another, let alone a VW van. No, I've never driven one. I
was going to ask you if you have a
It's
VW.
funny because I think it's weird how, so much is imagined, but there are certain things that are very specific locator details. So in terms of that van, when I was younger, my family went to the Cape many summers. I grew up in a family of 6 kids. And so my mom would come down with the little kids, which was my brother and I, and then the older kids would, come down with their boyfriends and girlfriends. And but I remember one time when it was just my mother and my brother and I, and there was the suicide lane that I described at the beginning of the book and this was a real thing. And I think it still may exist in some parts of the country.
There, yeah.
You can pass going in both ways. And it was very dangerous. I always remember it made my mother very nervous. And then one time there was a terrible accident when we were at the campground. And I still recall, hearing this accident, how powerful it was. And it was a VW van. And my mother was a nurse. And so my mother said, you guys stay. And she ran down and she helped. And it was a very, very bad situation. I remember it really was upsetting to her. It was a very bad accident. So how that got turned into this, I don't know. That's not the story in the novel at all. But the danger of that, even though I never drove a van, I wasn't in that accident, I can still hear that van colliding with a car.
Yeah.
My first
weird how it intertwines with your stories. Yeah, sorry, Liz, go ahead.
No, that's right. One of my first boyfriends drove a VW van and I'd never ridden in one. And it's terrifying because you're so used to the front of the car being out several feet in front of you. And all of a sudden, he pulled up to the car in front of us and
I know they are kind of dangerous, and they're very. I don't know where you all live if you see them as much, but for whatever reason, I feel like I see them all the time now. People are
right.
There's one on my street right now, and when I take my walk, I always kind of stop and look, and I always feel like the people at that house are like, oh, that woman's looking at our.
No, but you just with the hole in the floorboard, how it rusted out bigger. I mean, it's like I don't know. You describe things that you, as a reader, you just can relate to. I mean, even things I really didn't know about. You pulled me in really well. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I'm trying to find in my notes, but the photographer, I looked her up because you're the Red
good.
Dress. Vivian, no, is it Vivian?
Vivian Meyer.
Meyer, yeah, Vivian Meyer. I looked her up, her work, and she was unknown. And I loved your word. Oh my God, how did you say it? Please, it's at the end of your book, but it's so how you
No spoilers.
No, it's your research. It's about how
Oh, the
you.
author's note. Okay.
Oh, that.
Okay.
No, it's your research at the end, and it was so beautiful. Okay, it just says how many brilliant unknown, how many secret and brilliant people, not just writers, but artists are walking around us right now. I don't know how it sounds.
Well, no, and I think that's true.
Mindful of
absolutely.
the secret brilliant artists walk among us daily, because Vivian Meyer, this photographer, was unknown, and they found this batch of her photographs, and they're just amazing. They really are. And so then I loved your statement on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Her work is so beautiful. There's another second book that came out too called The Color Work, and there's one person who pretty much has all the photos, but she worked as a nanny her entire life, and sometimes she would take the children with her into these various parts of the city. I was reading that, it seems like your nanny's taking you down to like the stockyards. Like she would get into these like weird areas to take her photos, but she was a secret brilliant artist until she was discovered later. And I think there's so many I don't know, just so many people that are talented artists that perhaps for one reason or another don't get a chance to express it, or maybe didn't have the support or the wherewithal, or so
When you do your research, and they are such fascinating topics, but I'm a little ADD. So when I go down and do a deep dive into a subject, I am constantly getting pulled off in 20 other equally fascinating directions. And how do you handle that?
the wonders of the internet, right? You start looking at shoes and you end up with hammers, I mean, and of course, all the pop-ups like, are you interested in this? We saw you looking at this. I mean, that's in terms of advertising, but yes, with research, I don't know. I try not to do that. I just, I don't have a tried and true method to not go off course, because sometimes I'll find something else that I find interesting that maybe for a future project. But I am aware if I feel like, I'm researching so much that I'm not doing the writing. And that's always like kind of a tempting thing for writers. Like, I'll just keep researching. So
yeah. So my next question, I love what Jana was talking about when she just quoted your book about the van, going back to the VW, and how that was also her mother. I think for all writers like us who want to read other authors' wonderful words, they should buy this book, because I think the way that you talked about the van from the very beginning to the very end, I mean, the last scenes have the van in it, like it's its own entity in the novel, right? It's its own character. And you did such a great job. I think authors really could learn from that. So, okay, we're not going to give away the ending. So everybody be careful. Her book comes out next month. We don't want to talk about it. But I had a really hard time with the ending, not the very, very end, but like the last 3/4 of the book. So we could probably talk about the universal themes of children becoming like their parents. Like we could probably talk about that all day long. So how did you decide on the ending of the book? And how did you know that it was going to be like this with the women when you started, without giving away too much for people who haven't read it yet?
Well, on that same note, is it like an outline how you do it? I mean, that's another thing about how we were talking about with Liz earlier about the pickiness or whatever. I mean, I do a pretty clear outline, or it depends on what you write, but an outline or beat sheet or whatever. I do pretty clear, and I stick pretty close to it. I mean, and then I go in and make all the whole thing. But how do you do it? Yeah, and that's kind of the same.
Different projects, I feel like for me, require different things. For example, like a short story, I probably wouldn't outline.
Right. Of course, yeah.
If I have a project that I'm thinking about now that I think will be toward the historical fiction area, maybe. And in that case, I think I do need more of an outline. In this particular book, I did not outline. I kind of worked my way through it, working to hot spots, if that makes sense, kind of emotional hot spots.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
often those appeared early on and out of order. So yeah, I guess I don't want to give away the ending
So
either.
would you- Are you saying like there was a scene you knew had to happen, but you weren't sure what
Right.
happened?
For example, what ultimately happens with the mother character, Charlotte, that was one of the first things that ever came to me before anything else in the book. And so
Interesting.
I'm like, where is that happening? You know? And so
I'm
I,
surprised about that. I'm surprised that that was the first, one of the first, because of the way it
Yeah.
ends.
well, I always work with index cards, and I have these certain phrases and images that I have on my cards, and I refer to those. And those are the things like I can sort of reach through the story one at a time, if that makes sense. And one of the first teachers I ever had is a really terrific teacher in Los Angeles named Jim Crusoe, and he is just really just such a special gifted writing instructor, and he worked in a very organic way, in a very intuitive way, and he would always say, trust your subconscious. So that always, I've tried to always live by that or write by that. And so that has helped me so many times, because as I was just saying with the mother, for example, what am I supposed to do with that? I don't even know what the story is yet. But it seemed very hot to me. It felt important. It felt urgent. So I'm like, I do believe this is going to appear somewhere in the book. I just don't know when. Oh, and I would say, though, also just relative to outlining, that once I got all the material out, at least a couple times, I had a big bulk of material, I did have to go through and do sequencing and structure, because very few people could just completely write a novel without ever considering the structure. I've only ever heard of one writer. So, but for the initial getting the material down, I really like to work the first way.
And
Okay,
before
so
we move on, I see Lisa moving on, but did you know the ending? Did you know how you wanted to end it when you started, or did that come over time?
The very end with Viva?
Not the very, very end, but like that last 3 quarters, like when you started really wrapping the story. Did you know that, or did it come to you organically?
That came to me as I was writing, kind of like, well, if this happened, then what would happen next? And if it happened, then what would happen next? But no, I didn't know ahead of time.
Okay, interesting.
Okay,
Beautiful.
so
It's such a beautiful book. Go ahead.
Thank you.
No, we're such fans. It's so good.
half an hour is just not enough time.
It's not.
We need to-
But we would like our listeners to get to know you a little bit better, aside from just the process with this book. So we're going to do what we call the lightning round. Do you want to introduce that, Mandy?
Yeah, so we're just going to give you, we're going to take turns. We kind of go in order. We're going to ask you one question each. Just answer like as quick as you can, the first thing that comes to your mind. And it's not about your book, it's just about you. And we just want to know a little bit more about you. So I'll go first. So who's coming with you on book tour?
My husband is coming with me on book tour. He's, he's my #1 fan, I would say, and a huge supporter. And so this will be, lovely for him also to experience the fruition of all this. And so,
Very cool. Okay, go.
Janet?
Well, mine, well, so
lightning.
their biggest supporter, no, Scratch already just said that. I wrote, who do you see playing Charlotte and Viva? I'm back to the book stuff.
On a TV or movie?
In a movie. I mean, I have my vision. I'll tell you after you tell me. Do you have a vision?
Oh,
'Cause it's gonna be a movie. This is so good.
I did think of somebody, but I'm sorry, I can't think of who the actress was.
Mine is while you're thinking, Goldie Hawn and Kate Hudson. I honestly can see this with a mother-daughter.
Interesting. A true mother-daughter.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I know, and that was off grid. I was initially just saying Kate Hudson for the daughter, and then I'm like, wait, Goldie Hawn? That'd be go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, go.
so your appearance here on Virgin Authors is part of a hybrid book tour, part virtual and part in real life. So are the book signings, the real life book signings, are they terrifying to you, or are you looking forward to them, or both?
Well, it's interesting because when you're writing, you're so solitary and you're home so much
Right?
alone, and factor in COVID, and we've all been so isolated for so long. It seems kind of wild to think about being out so much and meeting so many people. But I enjoy it. I like connecting with my readers and other writers, and it's fun to see when different people from different times of your life come to a reading, and maybe it's somebody I went to high school with, and
That'd
maybe
be
it's
cool.
somebody I taught last year, and
Yeah,
maybe it's my friend I just saw yesterday, or it's that wonderful mixture where it's, oh my gosh, people from all different times.
That's fun. Okay, what's your favorite drink?
Oh, my favorite drink. I've kind of become addicted to watermelon juice.
Nice.
This is very refreshing, and it's very good for you. And it gets so hot in LA in the summer. And I think I discovered it last summer when I was hiking with my husband, and we were up in one of the canyons, and somebody was selling this down on the street. And it was just like the most delicious thing on this very hot day.
So cute.
Okay, Jana.
Okay, really quick. Downtime television thrillers, comedies, reality shows, rom-coms. Which
What
one?
do you watch?
Yeah, what do you watch downtime? Or do you even watch TV?
No, I watch a lot of TV. My husband's a film editor, and so we like to watch everything that comes out. He also edits documentaries, so we like to watch a lot of documentaries. I would say, well, now that we're Oscar season is approaching, I thought Tar was pretty amazing. I don't know if you've seen that film, but it's with Kate
That was
Winslet.
Yeah.
Really, really wonderful. Just a TV show that I liked in the last year. I liked Hacks a lot with Jean Smart, which I thought was very funny, about the comedian making a comeback. And it's about she also has a daughter in it, and then a younger comedian that she's kind of mentoring. And
I'm gonna have to look for that. I love Jean
Me
Smart.
too. I love Jean Smart,
Yeah.
right?
What's it called?
Oh,
Hacks?
it's
Hacks?
called Hacks, Hacks.
Okay, thanks. I haven't-
Okay, so you have a book of poetry coming out as well. Is that more personal? Is it harder to put that out into the world than the novel?
I wish I had a book of poetry coming out, but I actually don't. I have some poems that just came out. So, yeah, so poetry is a much newer form for me. So,
Well, the novel was a new form for you, so you're
Yeah.
just random
Well,
now over.
I mean, the wonderful thing about poetry is, you can just take like one little image or one line and just drop down into it and come out. And I mean, that's very attractive to me, to be able to work with such brevity and depth concurrently. I mean, I don't know why I didn't get into it earlier. Part of it, going back to the COVID era, we started reading poetry in the morning, just reading a couple poems to try to start the day in a positive way.
Lovely.
And from
Okay,
reading
top
that,
three poets.
pardon?
Top three poets.
Up three poets.
Do
Top.
you
Give
have
me
some
three
favorite?
poets if you were recommending poetry.
Let's see. One would be
Let's say accessible poetry.
accessible poetry. Well, I don't think you could go wrong with Emily Dickinson, always. Matthew Zapruder is a wonderful poet. He just edited the Best American Poetry for 2022, which I recommend getting. And so that gives you a kind of a smorgasbord of poets. Mary Oliver, I would say, is a very beautiful.
So you and your husband would read poetry in the morning?
I know it sounds kind of twee or something, but
Oh, it's lovely.
Look at how much we learned about you in
You, Mary?
so, like just one poem, because it was like especially in those hard times where it's like, you're starting every day and the news, politics and whatever all was going on. And it was like, just pick up the New Yorker and read a poem, or there's a poetry called Rattle. This really great. And they put up a poem of the day. So I would just, click on that and read whatever they put up for the day.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Okay, do you have some favorite author?
Favorite author?
Yes.
It's funny because I was just writing a response to a question about that, and I would have to say two who, that I read very early on when I was first starting to write and that still really inspire me are Alice Munro and Joy Williams. And they're both, very different kind of writers, but Alice Munro writes so beautifully about women and interior life and writes just with great depth. The way she can illuminate small town life. I think she's pretty remarkable. And then Joy Williams is quite different. I like her for her writing is kind of ominous and spiky, and she writes in a very dark, poetic way with a lot of unusual humor. So those two, there's so many authors I admire, but those are a couple of them.
Okay,
Mine
well,
are always really light questions, and mine. Do you have a pet that sits with you? And then we're gonna probably have to end this. But
Do I have a pet that sits with me now? Oh,
Yeah.
I wish I did. I did have a dog through most of this book, and we lost her a couple years ago. But she heard. I like to read out loud too, because I feel like you can instantly hear. Not perform it, just read it. You can hear when you're off or when you could cut something. And so I sometimes would read to the dog, and she'd be like, okay.
I love that.
Yes, I love dogs, and this was a wonderful rescue dog that we found in the streets of Hollywood, little pit bull. So
that
That's
always
lovely.
helps. That's nice.
Love that. It's a great
That's fine.
story.
Yeah, it was so nice to meet you.
it was.
Mary, we appreciate you so much. And I assume you listeners can get your book anywhere books are sold.
Absolutely, yes.
And
Hey,
what date is it coming out?
It's coming out April 4th, but you can pre-order it now, which is a wonderful thing for any writer who's got a book coming out. To pre-order it is a
Right.
great way to support them. But of course, when you come to a reading and buy it at the store, that's another great way. You kind of can't go wrong.
Nice.
No, you can't. It's well worth your time, people. Definitely pick it up. I'm trying to pull up the picture of it again, but yeah, it's beautiful.
all right, real quick before we go, on our next show, the Virgin Authors will be celebrating our first anniversary.
Yeah,
So join us live.
we're turning one.
We are. Yay, we made it through our first year.
A whole year. We're virgins at 1 year old.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
We're so excited. I forgot about that. That's a good.
Welcoming author Tess Thompson, who is a best-selling author, and we will have birthday cupcakes and tiaras and surprise drop-ins from past guests and new friends. And please join us for the fun on March 16th. And as always, you can join us here on Facebook Live on the third Thursday of every month, and more information on our website at virginauthors.com. And please watch for our special Zibby guests every month, because this is a slightly different format for us, and we have really enjoyed getting to know you, Mary.
Thank you
So much,
I
Mary.
loved meeting you. I love what you're doing, and this has been wonderful. Thank you.
We'll come back
Thanks.
to
Good
our
luck with everything. It's going to be amazing. So
That's right. We'll have you back on our next
hashtag
one.
Goldie Hawn and hashtag Kate Huston.
Good idea.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.